A wounded German Shepherd was found deep in the forest. But after investigating his past, the truth shook even the toughest officers. In the faint light of dawn, Officer Melanie Brooks stepped out of her patrol car and gazed at the mist-shrouded forest that stretched into the distance. The call had come in late last night. An abandoned dog, possibly injured, had been spotted by a pair of hikers. What made the tip-off more unusual was that the hikers claimed the dog wore something like a police K9 harness. Melanie, known for her calm under pressure, felt a surge of concern. If the dog truly was a trained K9, it had no business lying alone out here. And yet, that was precisely where it was. Melanie switched on her flashlight and proceeded cautiously, calling for backup as she moved between towering pines and damp undergrowth. The forest felt eerily quiet, as though holding its breath, and every rustle made her pulse quicken. She had handled missing persons cases, tackled midnight raids, and even rescued a cat stuck on a billboard. But something about this call was different. A K9 German Shepherd, alone in the woods, suggested a scenario that made little sense. Was the dog's handler nearby? Had there been an accident? Or worse, had the dog been deliberately abandoned by someone who knew exactly its worth? The hum of distant sirens grew closer as Deputy Lee arrived, stepping out of his squad car with a first aid kit. Together, he and Melanie advanced, guided by footprints the hikers had left behind. Occasional paw prints, large and deep, also hinted at the shepherd's path. Moist leaves clung to their uniforms and the cold morning air prickled against their skin. Ahead, in a small clearing, they found the dog. It was lying on its side, breathing shallowly. Its once proud harness, stamped with a faded police emblem, was caked in mud. Melanie felt her heart tighten as she approached the motionless figure. Ever so gently, Melanie knelt and examined the shepherd. Deputy Lee hovered nearby, shining his flashlight. The dog was underweight, its ribs evident beneath matted fur, and one of its paws was swollen. There were no obvious bullet wounds, but a series of old scars along its hind leg hinted at past struggles. When Melanie lightly touched the harness, the shepherd flinched. Something about this dog screamed experience and heartbreak in equal measure. She used a soothing tone, the same she'd employed when calming frantic victims. "Hey, buddy," she whispered, "you're okay now." The dog opened its eyes, barely conscious. Animal control arrived shortly after, but Melanie insisted on driving the shepherd to the nearest veterinary clinic herself. She had encountered many strays in her years on the force, yet none wearing official K9 gear. Questions tumbled through her mind. How did a trained service dog end up abandoned like this? Had it been stolen? Or was there a fallen handler somewhere? Throughout the drive, the shepherd lay motionless in the back seat, occasionally letting out a faint whine. Melanie offered reassuring words, fully aware that trust was earned, not demanded, especially from a creature that had apparently known betrayal before. At Crescent Falls Veterinary Center, Dr. Stevens greeted Melanie with a grave expression. The shepherd's microchip scan revealed a stunning detail. The dog was registered to a specialized military K9 unit that had once operated overseas. However, the database flagged the record as classified. Dr. Stevens carefully removed the filthy harness and began the examination. X-rays showed a fractured toe, and blood tests hinted at malnutrition. Meanwhile, Melanie's phone buzzed incessantly. Word of the unusual discovery had spread, and soon a detective from the state police was on the line, asking questions Melanie herself couldn't yet confidently address. Within hours, uniformed officers, reporters, and curious onlookers crowded the clinic's parking lot. The department had never dealt with a discovery quite like this. A combat-trained shepherd mysteriously left to starve in local woods. Rumors buzzed about top-secret missions or illegal smuggling rings. Melanie brushed off the wilder theories, but couldn't dismiss her unease. If the dog had once served on dangerous assignments, who might be searching for it now? Dr. Stevens emerged from surgery, confirming that the shepherd would recover, but needed time to rebuild trust. Melanie, moved by an inexplicable protectiveness, volunteered to foster the injured K9 wholeheartedly. That evening, she brought the shepherd, temporarily named Echo, to her modest home. The detective had joked that Echo might be short for Echo Unit, referencing some rumored Black Ops division. But Melanie found the name fitting in another way. The dog's silent gaze seemed to echo untold stories of loyalty, betrayal, and survival. Gently, she settled Echo in a soft bed near the living room sofa, offering water and a bowl of protein-rich kibble. He hesitated before taking a cautious bite. As Melanie watched him eat, she felt a surge of determination. No matter the classified details, Echo deserved a new start. Morning brought fresh complications. The detective had forwarded a cryptic email from a federal liaison, warning local authorities to keep the shepherd's existence quiet. The note stated that Echo's record was sealed under national security protocols. Melanie frowned at the phrasing. Why would a dog's record be considered a threat to national security? She logged onto the station's database, only to find minimal data. The K9 had served on specialized tasks abroad, then abruptly gone off-grid. The strangest part was the final mention of a missing handler named Lieutenant Parker, presumed dead. Yet no body had ever been found since. At noon, Echo surprised Melanie by limping over to her side, sniffing at her uniform as though searching for familiarity. She felt a pang of sorrow imagining the dog's confusion. Did he miss his handler, or was he haunted by memories of missions gone wrong? Answering a knock at the door, she found Detective Olson wearing a grim expression. Olson explained that federal agents would soon arrive to take custody of Echo. Allegedly, they suspected involvement in an unsanctioned operation. However, when Melanie mentioned Lieutenant Parker's unsolved disappearance, Olson's demeanor shifted. Maybe, he mused, Echo was the key witness indeed. Determined not to lose the dog to bureaucratic red tape, Melanie raced to gather any clues from Echo's harness and the vague references in the files. She discovered a partially legible patch sewn into the harness lining, showing an emblem with the letters RAVEN. Searching the acronym turned up nothing conclusive, fueling her suspicion that it was part of a covert group. If Echo had been part of an unsanctioned operation, perhaps his disappearance was no accident. More pressing was the realization that if federal agents seized Echo, the truth might vanish with him. She refused to let that happen. Acting swiftly, Melanie contacted Deputy Lee and confided her fears. Together they planned to hide Echo until they could verify the details of RAVEN. The detective was initially hesitant, reminding Melanie that obstructing a federal order was a serious offense. But as she pointed out, the entire situation was far from normal. If Echo held the key to unveiling a cover-up or proving Parker's fate, then their duty extended beyond standard procedure. While the sun dipped low, casting elongated shadows across quiet streets, Melanie and Deputy Lee discreetly moved Echo to a safe house belonging to a trusted retired officer. In that humble one-story house on the outskirts of town, Echo rested on a blanket, gazing at Melanie with an intensity that spoke of curiosity and guarded hope. She felt a surge of protectiveness, realizing she was now as much a guardian of the dog as he was a guardian of a secret that could unravel hidden truths. Outside, cicadas droned in the warm twilight, and the officer double-checked the locks. Tomorrow, federal agents would arrive and questions would multiply. For now, Melanie whispered softly to Echo, promising him safety, unaware how explosive the answers would be. Sunrise found Melanie still wide awake, slumped in a worn-out armchair in the safe house living room. She'd spent much of the night scouring the police database and cross-referencing every snippet she could glean about RAVEN. The deeper she dug, the murkier it became. The missing handler, Lieutenant Parker, had apparently vanished during a covert deployment in Eastern Europe. Officially, He was declared dead following an operation that went off the books. Yet certain incident reports hinted at his survival. Some borderline conspiracy sites even claimed Parker had discovered corruption within his own unit, prompting superiors to silence him. That theory alone made Melanie's stomach churn. If Parker was alive, then who was behind the dog's abandonment? And if Parker was indeed gone, how had Echo survived so long without a handler? At intervals, the shepherd would shift restlessly, occasionally lifting his head to watch her with calm curiosity. She offered him gentle reassurance, determined to honor her promise of protection. By mid-morning, Deputy Lee arrived with a box of supplies: fresh bandages, specialized kibble, and a portable microchip reader borrowed from a colleague. They worked quietly, aware that any phone call or text message might signal the arrival of federal agents. Melanie studied Echo's unresponsive expression whenever the conversation drifted to talk of secrets. He seemed exhausted, though his gaze held an alert glint that spoke of his training. Sometimes she reached over to scratch behind his ears, feeling a pang at how quickly he relaxed under her touch. It was as if Echo craved human closeness, but remained wary of letting his guard down. She recalled Dr. Stevens's advice. Canines with specialized skill sets often formed unbreakable bonds with their handlers, becoming lost and anxious without them. Yet Echo's resilience surprised everyone. If he had truly roamed the forests alone, coping with injuries and hunger, his resolve must be extraordinary. Even so, time was running short, and the sense of urgency thickened the air. Shortly before noon, Detective Olson called with a heads-up. Federal SUVs had been spotted on the highway leading toward Crescent Falls. Given the classification of Echo's file, there was no doubt they were coming for him. Melanie set her jaw, glancing at the K9 who lay calmly on a folded blanket, as though awaiting her decision. Could she trust these mysterious agents with Echo's well-being? Or would they whisk him away to some undisclosed facility, burying all evidence of Lieutenant Parker's story? Deputy Lee proposed a last-minute plan to redirect the agents, but Melanie shook her head. For all they knew, Parker was out there, alive, and any official action might tip off the wrong people. Besides, as an officer of the law, Melanie wasn't inclined to break it. Instead, she'd use every legal angle possible to keep Echo safe. Her heart pounded when she heard the rumble of engines outside. This was it, the moment that would decide Echo's fate. The federal agents were led by a stern-faced woman in a crisp black suit who identified herself only as Special Agent Cordova. With clipped precision, she presented documents stating that Echo was government property and had to be surrendered immediately. Melanie read the paperwork with mounting frustration, noticing how carefully each line was phrased. It granted the agency sweeping authority under the guise of national security. Even Deputy Lee, initially brimming with protest, fell silent at the legal jargon. Echo watched from behind Melanie's leg, ears pricked. She felt him tense, a subtle reaction that told her everything she needed to know. Handing over this dog without a fight felt like a betrayal of her oath to protect the innocent. Cordova's eyes flicked from Melanie to Echo. "We appreciate your cooperation," she said evenly, "but I'm sure you understand this matter is bigger than local jurisdiction." Her tone carried an implicit threat. The air seemed to crackle with tension. Melanie summoned every ounce of composure and responded, "Agent Cordova, with due respect, Echo is currently under medical treatment, and I have a sworn statement from our veterinarian confirming he's not fit for transport. Unless you have a court order, we can't release him." The statement was half bluff, half truth. Technically, Dr. Stevens's note did say Echo needed rest, but it didn't forbid relocation. Yet Melanie prayed that the bureaucratic wheels would slow Cordova. A tense silence followed. Cordova exchanged glances with her colleagues, then stiffly nodded. "We'll expect daily updates," she replied. "And if we find you've interfered with our investigation, there will be consequences." Melanie's grip on Echo's collar relaxed, relief mingling with the knowledge that she'd only bought time. Agent Cordova left with a pointed warning to have the dog ready by week's end. As the black SUVs pulled away, the hush of the safe house pressed in, and Melanie struggled to steady her breathing. That night, Melanie drove Echo to a discreet corner of the county, her childhood home, a small farm still owned by her uncle. The plan was to shelter Echo somewhere no one would think to look. Uncle Ray, a retired Marine, greeted them with a slow nod. He'd served in multiple deployments and recognized the haunted look in Echo's eyes. "I'll keep him safe," he promised, patting Echo's head gently. Seen dogs like this before, loyal beyond reason but wounded on the inside. As they settled Echo in a spacious barn, Melanie noticed how he sniffed every corner, as though piecing together the place. Despite his exhaustion, the shepherd maintained an air of discipline. Uncle Ray observed from the doorway, arms folded across his chest. "When I was overseas," he said softly, "there were rumors of an elite unit that used dogs for unofficial operations. If your feds are after him, that might be bigger trouble than you think." Melanie exhaled, her suspicions only growing. Over the following days, Melanie juggled normal duty shifts with surreptitious visits to the farm. Each time, she brought Echo supplies and updates on the intensifying search. The local media had gotten wind that a special dog was at the heart of a jurisdictional fight, though official details were scarce. Agent Cordova's presence grew more ominous, with sightings of her black SUVs combing the roads at odd hours. More than once, Melanie spotted a nondescript sedan tailing her. She fought to keep her composure, suspecting her phone might be tapped. Even so, she pressed on, combing through old military bulletins for any reference to Parker or RAVEN. The break came unexpectedly when an elderly ex-sergeant reached out, claiming he'd once served with Parker and the dog known as Echo. According to him, Parker had stumbled on a smuggling racket involving high-level officers. That made Parker a target, and Echo too. The ex-sergeant urged caution, warning that any exposure could provoke lethal retaliation. On the sixth day, as the sun dipped below rolling hills, Melanie made a decision. She called a meeting with Detective Olson, Deputy Lee, and her uncle in the barn. Echo lay in the straw, ears flicking at every noise. Melanie laid out what she'd learned from the ex-sergeant. Parker had discovered the smuggling network and tried to expose it. Higher-ups arranged his disappearance, labeling him dead. Echo must have escaped or been hidden, eventually winding up abandoned in those woods. "We can't hand him over," Melanie concluded firmly, stroking Echo's back. "He's living evidence of a crime that's been buried." Olson agreed, though lines of worry etched his brow. They needed a plan, something that would force the truth into public view before Cordova's group could silence them. Uncle Ray offered a grim smile. "I've got old contacts who hate dirty secrets," he said. "We gather proof of what Parker uncovered, feed it to the right channels, and let the blaze of publicity protect Echo." Melanie nodded, her resolve unshakable tonight. Early the following morning, Melanie parked her patrol car beneath a cluster of tall pines near the outskirts of Uncle Ray's property. The crisp air tasted of impending rain, and clouds gathered above the sloping hills. She had parked intentionally out of sight, aware that the black SUVs and unmarked sedans might still be prowling. Wiping the condensation from her windshield, she took a moment to steady her nerves. A day had passed since she and the others finalized their plan. Now came the hardest part, acting on it before Agent Cordova's timetable expired. She carefully unloaded a thick folder of documents, photocopies of everything the ex-sergeant had sent her. The file painted an unsettling picture of high-level corruption, overseas missions that veered into smuggling contraband under cover of classified operations. At the center stood an enigmatic group with alleged ties to RAVEN, orchestrating clandestine deals. Reading the lines still made her stomach twist. It wasn't just that these alleged criminals were high-ranking. It was the breadth of their reach. If Parker had tried to expose them, he must have realized how dangerous they were. Echo, once his partner, might carry evidence in the form of scars, training commands, or possibly embedded device data that the conspirators wanted eliminated. She walked to the barn, each footstep crunching on damp gravel. Inside, Uncle Ray was seated on a hay bale, quietly stroking Echo's head. The shepherd lay with half-closed eyes, as though lulled by the older man's calming presence. Despite the peaceful scene, tension thrummed in the air. Ray greeted Melanie with a subdued nod. "Any sign of them?" he asked, voice low. She shook her head. "Not yet, but I'm sure they're looking. Cordova won't wait much longer." She held up the file. "This is everything we need to set the plan in motion." Standing, Ray tucked his hands into his jacket pockets, glancing at Echo. "Then let's get to it." Over the next hour, their small group assembled in the barn. Detective Olson arrived first, dressed casually to avoid drawing attention, followed by Deputy Lee in an unmarked pickup. They formed a circle around a makeshift table composed of plywood balanced on crates, the folder laid out in the center. A single fluorescent lamp buzzed overhead, casting flickers of pale light onto determined faces. "I made contact with that journalist from the regional paper," Olson said. "She's trustworthy, keeps her sources protected. If we give her the story and documents, it might blow the cover off this operation." Deputy Lee drummed his fingers on the table. "Cordova and her people will try to stop publication. We need more than local press. We need a bigger outlet to guarantee they can't stamp it out so easily." Melanie agreed, glancing at Echo. "Still, let's start small. Enough to create momentum, but not so big that we provoke an immediate crackdown. Once the first wave of coverage hits, we push the evidence further up the chain." She tapped a page showing statements about Parker's final assignment. If Parker truly survived, maybe he left behind digital proof. We only know he caught on to the smuggling. He could have stored data with an ally. Uncle Ray cleared his throat. "I can reach out to a friend in the Marine Corps. Back in the day, he specialized in cryptographic analysis. If Parker hid intel in some secure location, my friend might decipher how to find it." The plan was rapidly taking shape, each piece weaving a fragile safety net to protect Echo and, they hoped, reveal Parker's fate. Looking down at the shepherd, Melanie felt a surge of empathy. If Parker had gone underground or been taken, how many months had Echo wandered or been shuffled between unscrupulous hands before ending up in those woods? She knelt, stroking his fur. "I won't let them harm you," she promised. Echo peered at her with those perceptive eyes, as though he understood far more than he could express. They split up tasks. Detective Olson would deliver key documents to the reporter, coded references for bigger media outlets to follow. Deputy Lee would head back to the station to monitor official channels, ensuring they had advanced warning if Cordova obtained a warrant. Uncle Ray would tap his old connections, sending discreet feelers for any trace of Parker or for leftover data. Melanie would remain on guard with Echo, waiting until nightfall to move him again if necessary. Everyone understood the risks. Though the plan was not strictly within standard procedure, their moral compasses guided them. The rottenness of the allegations demanded they fight from the shadows, at least until the truth found daylight. Throughout the morning, the barn bustled with whispered phone calls and hushed strategizing. Echo, for the most part, dozed on a bed of fresh straw. Occasionally, he would rise to stretch or sniff the corners, tail wagging softly if someone approached with a friendly gesture. Melanie marveled at how quickly he'd bonded with Uncle Ray. "Dogs sense a soldier's heartbeat," her uncle joked. "We speak the same language. Loyalty, watchfulness." Ray now stood outside, scanning the horizon while speaking in low tones on his cell. Melanie guessed he was talking to the cryptography contact. She hoped it might yield at least a hint about RAVN's hidden files. By mid-afternoon, Detective Olson returned, panting as though he'd jogged the entire distance. His face held a mix of excitement and apprehension. "The reporter took the docks," he announced. "She's intrigued, says she'll run a story as soon as she can verify some details. And here's the big news. She recognized the name Parker from some leaked cables years back. She believes he might have left behind an encrypted testimony." Melanie's pulse quickened. "Where?" "Unknown. She only knows rumors of a digital deposit that Parker allegedly made to a secure server. If those files resurface, this story goes national." No sooner had Olson finished speaking than Deputy Lee's phone rang. He answered, stepping aside. Within moments, his expression darkened. He rejoined them grimly. "We've got a problem. Cordova's filed a request for indefinite detention of Echo under a special directive. She's claiming evidence of foreign involvement, citing intelligence loopholes. If the judge grants it, they can seize Echo anytime, medical reasons or not." An uneasy hush descended. Melanie pressed a hand to her temple. "That means they'll come prepared with armed backup. We have to push the story faster. If we can't get it out before they arrive, we lose all leverage." They deliberated in tense whispers, searching for an immediate move. The reporter needed a day or two to confirm details. They might not have a day. Ray emerged from outside, tucking his phone away. "My friend's analyzing references to RAVEN and Parker's name. Says there's a possibility that Parker installed a failsafe, some hidden code that triggers if certain conditions aren't met. But we need more time to track it." Time was in short supply. Glancing out the barn doors at the lengthening shadows, Melanie decided they couldn't wait for the unstoppable wheels of official justice. She turned to Olson. "Get the reporter on the line. Tell her we have a federal raid imminent. If she has anything, any partial confirmation, I want it live by tomorrow morning. That might buy us breathing space." Olson dashed off, phone in hand, while Ray and Lee hurried to fortify the farm perimeter. Should Cordova's vehicles arrive soon, the group intended to stall in any legal manner. Echo, unsettled by the sudden flurry of tension, followed Melanie as she double-checked each door. The dog pressed his nose to her leg, apparently sensing her anxiety. She patted his head and offered a gentle smile. "Hang in there, buddy. We're close." The vow echoed in her mind. If Parker remained out there somewhere, possibly in danger, the truth needed revealing. And if Parker truly was gone, then honoring his courage meant exposing the criminals he fought against. An unexpected ring cut through the barn's hush, Melanie's personal cell phone. She answered guardedly. "Hello?" A muffled male voice responded. "Officer Brooks, I got your contact from a friend. Name's Reyes, ex-lieutenant, served with Parker." Melanie's heart hammered. "Go on," she urged. Reyes cleared his throat. "Word is you found Parker's shepherd. I can't talk long, but listen. Parker suspected high-level corruption bigger than contraband. Some of our own superiors were selling intel to foreign agents. Parker gathered audio evidence using a small device attached to the K9's harness. He took Echo and fled. If that harness is missing, you might want to find it. Parker said the device was hidden in a small seam. The data inside could blow everything wide open." Stunned, Melanie took a moment to process. Echo's harness was currently bagged as evidence at the vet clinic. She recalled Dr. Stevens handing it back in a sealed container. At the time, no one had realized it might contain anything more than logos and worn straps. She told Reyes they would retrieve it, and he insisted, "Do it fast. Agents might be onto that lead. If you get the device, you get Parker's proof. Without it, you've got scraps." Before Melanie could ask more, Reyes ended the call abruptly. She stared at her phone, adrenaline pounding. So that was the missing puzzle piece. Audio evidence, physically hidden in the harness. Everything hinged on that. She relayed the information quickly to Olson and Lee, who shared her urgency. They had to get to the clinic before Cordova did. They agreed Olson would slip into the vet facility, disguised in civilian clothes, while Melanie provided remote backup, scanning for any sign of surveillance. Uncle Ray readied his truck for a swift pickup in case they needed to flee. Echo, however, grew visibly restless when Olson tried to depart alone. He paced, letting out a low whine as though sensing something crucial was about to happen and wanting to be involved. Melanie knelt and stroked the shepherd's face. "I need you here with Ray," she whispered. "I'll be right outside, I promise." The dog's ears twitched, but he stopped pacing, giving a short, uncertain bark. Olson drove off into the dusk, headlights off until he hit the main road. Melanie followed at a distance in her personal sedan, phone on silent except for direct calls. If Cordova's men were monitoring the main highways, they'd see only 2 random vehicles. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel, running through potential scenarios. Best case, Olson found the harness intact, retrieved the device, and vanished without a trace. Worst case, Cordova's team was already there, lying in wait. 20 minutes later, Olson texted that he was outside the clinic. So far, no sign of federal agents. Melanie positioned herself behind an abandoned gas station a block away, scanning the empty street. The tension felt almost suffocating. Inside the clinic, Olson navigated darkened corridors. Dr. Stevens had kindly offered to leave the harness in a locked cabinet. With only emergency staff on duty, Olson hoped no one would question a former detective showing up with a borrowed key. Melanie's phone buzzed. A single word. "Got it." Relief flooded her veins. But before she could exhale, movement flickered at the corner of her rearview mirror. A black SUV rolled slowly down the cross street. The same brand, same tinted windows. Her heart jumped. She texted Olson, "Feds inbound. Hurry." She started the engine, ready to peel out and provide a distraction if needed. What happened next took place in a heart-stopping rush. Olson dashed out a side exit, harness tucked under his jacket. Melanie watched from afar as the SUV picked up speed, evidently spotting him. Without hesitation, she pulled her sedan onto the main street, flicking on her hazard lights and careening forward. Sure enough, the black SUV braked hard, uncertain whether to pursue Olson or respond to the reckless driver causing a sudden scene. Olson seized that moment to slip around the building's back, diving into an alley. Melanie forced her car into a sputtering stop, feigning engine trouble under a flickering street lamp. The SUV paused, then roared past her in frustration, presumably to circle around. Her phone chimed again with the best possible news. Clear. Melanie finally breathed again once Detective Olson's text said he was safe with the harness in hand. She watched as the black SUV disappeared around a distant corner, tires screeching. Her makeshift distraction had worked, but she knew it wouldn't be long before Cordova's people realized they'd been duped. Leaving her hazard lights on, she slowly pulled away from the curb, doing her best to maintain the role of a driver with a sputtering engine until she'd turned onto a side street. Only then did she kill the lights and accelerate, heart hammering against her ribs. Olson had a rendezvous point 5 miles away, an abandoned lot near the old sugar factory. Melanie reached it in under 10 minutes, weaving along back streets to ensure no one followed. When she arrived, she found him perched on the hood of his car, clutching the plastic evidence bag that held Echo's mud-caked harness. The relief in his eyes matched her own. They slid into his car, using the overhead dome light to inspect the harness's seams and layers. The battered logo was hardly legible, but a faint patch of embroidered letters, RAVEN, still showed. As she ran her fingers along the thick material, Melanie felt a small lump beneath a stitched flap. Carefully, they pried open that section, unraveling a hidden pocket. Within seconds, Olson extracted a slender black device no bigger than a thumb drive. It had no obvious markings or ports, just a tiny, almost invisible seam running along one edge. Melanie's pulse quickened. "That's it," she whispered, recalling Reyes's words. Parker had hidden an audio recorder in Echo's harness, hoping it would survive if he didn't. If the conspirators thought they'd disposed of evidence by discarding the dog, they'd never imagined this device might still exist. "We have to find a secure way to listen to it," Olsen said, voice taut with urgency. "If it's encrypted, we might need special software." Melanie nodded. "Uncle Ray's contact might help. Meanwhile, we should keep the harness itself somewhere safe. Cordova will guess we found something." They agreed that Melanie would bring the device to the farm, letting Ray handle the next steps in decoding. Olsen would hide the harness in a storage locker rented under an alias, ensuring no one could trace it easily. With a firm handshake, they parted ways. Despite the strain and fear, Melanie felt a flicker of hope. If Parker's testimony was inside that device, proof of corruption and smuggling, then Echo's rescue might accomplish something far larger, justice for the officer who risked everything. Under the cover of night, she returned to Uncle Ray's. The farmstead seemed calm. Crickets sang in the grass while a single porch light illuminated the gravel driveway. She found Ray in the barn, finishing up with feeding time for Echo. At the sight of her, the shepherd ambled over, tail wagging in cautious greeting. Over the past days, that subtle show of trust never failed to warm Melanie's chest. She held up the tiny device. "We found it," she announced quietly, mindful of how even an innocent barn could have ears if the wrong people were determined enough. Ray's expression sharpened. "Looks like we've got Parker's missing link." Melanie explained the events at the clinic, how the black SUV had nearly caught Olsen. Ray listened intently, frown deepening as she described how close Cordova's people had come. "At dawn, I'll drive out," he said. "I've arranged for my contact to meet me 2 counties over, a guy who can bypass most encryption protocols without leaving a trace. If there's an audio file on here, he'll pull it." Melanie handed over the device, nerves taut. "I just hope it's not corrupt or damaged. Parker risked so much." They sealed the device in a padded envelope, carefully placed in a sealed metal box Ray had kept from his time transporting sensitive documents overseas. Before heading inside to rest, Melanie spent a few minutes brushing Echo's coat in the quiet barn, a routine they'd fallen into. Each stroke of the brush relaxed him, and she noticed how he nudged her gently every so often. If he once belonged to Parker, he must have grown used to such care in better days. Strange how a man and his dog could serve in secret operations, then vanish. She wondered if Parker was out there hoping Echo was safe. If so, she silently vowed that she and her allies would make sure both of them received the justice they deserved. Sleep proved elusive that night. Though the bunkhouse at Ray's farm was modestly comfortable, Melanie lay awake, replaying each risk in her head. Cordova's request for indefinite detention could be approved at any moment. The next morning could bring a squad of armed agents pounding on the door. While Uncle Ray left on his mission at the break of dawn, she'd remain behind with Echo, bracing for what came next. She rose before sunrise, dressing quickly in jeans and a flannel shirt to blend with the farm setting. Echo padded beside her, ears forward, watching her every movement as though sensing the tension in the air. Ray departed just after 5, driving an old pickup with the sealed box beneath the passenger seat. He gave Melanie's shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "Hold the fort. If anything happens, take Echo and head to the fallback spot." She nodded, hugging him in gratitude. As his truck rumbled away, she returned to the barn. The hours stretched on, heavy with anticipation. Detective Olsen texted updates. The local journalist was preparing a preliminary article but needed a verifiable source to confirm the smuggling angle. Deputy Lee reported that Cordova's name had appeared twice in courthouse logs, requesting closed hearings. Nothing spelled good news there. By late morning, Melanie decided she and Echo could use some exercise. She led him out to a fenced paddock behind the barn. The shepherd limped slightly, a lingering reminder of his previous malnourishment and possible injuries. Still, he seemed eager to stretch his legs. She tossed a rubber ball and Echo ambled after it. Watching him try to be playful tugged at Melanie's heart. Here was a dog once trained for tactical missions, now tentatively learning how to be carefree. She saw the moment he caught the ball in his mouth, tail wagging, eyes bright. For an instant, all the worry in her mind receded. She crouched, arms wide, calling him back. Echo came trotting up, dropping the ball into her hands as if to say, "I still remember joy." A thunderous roar broke the serenity, an engine accelerating on the road to the farm. Melanie's chest seized. Gripping Echo's collar, she hurried to the paddock's edge. Dust billowed as a black SUV sped in, skidding to a halt near the farmhouse. Cordova and two other agents emerged, each sporting the grim composure of people on a mission. "Stay here," Melanie whispered to Echo, though she knew he might not obey if things went south. She left him behind the tall fence and walked out to meet the intruders, doing her best to appear unruffled. Cordova wasted no time. "Officer Brooks, we have a federal order granting us immediate custody of the dog." She brandished a legal document. Melanie's stomach lurched at the official seals and signatures. Cordova's gaze swept the yard, noting the quiet barn and the fence behind which Echo lurked. Her two fellow agents stepped forward, clearly ready to retrieve their target by force if necessary. "Where is the K-9?" Cordova demanded. "There are no more excuses for his delay." Instinct flared inside Melanie. She raised a hand to hold them off. "He's in the paddock, but I have a sworn vet statement stating he still needs rehabilitation. Moving him now could—" Cordova cut her off. "This matter overrides local assessments. Unless you want to be charged with obstruction, stand aside." Melanie's heart pounded with a mix of anger and fear. She glanced back at Echo, who had moved closer, ears flattened. The dog picked up on her distress. Deputy Lee's pickup appeared from the far side, tearing over the gravel with reckless speed. He jumped out, shooting Melanie a frantic look. "We got word from the journalist. The story is going live in an hour," he called. "If you seize Echo now, there'll be public outcry." Cordova's stern facade didn't budge. "We have legal authority," she repeated. "Move." A standoff loomed in the dusty farmyard. One of the agents began circling toward the paddock fence. Echo barked sharply, pressing against the wooden rails, everything hung by a thread. If they took Echo, all the momentum Melanie and her allies had built might collapse. Cordova lifted her wrist to speak into a radio. "Proceed with retrieval." Melanie clenched her fists, eyes darting for some last-minute reprieve. From behind her, she heard a crunch of tires, another vehicle approaching. Relief and anxiety tangled as she recognized Detective Olson's sedan. He parked abruptly and got out, waving a cell phone. "Agent Cordova, you might want to see this," he announced, voice echoing off the barn walls. The Crescent Falls Tribune just published a front-page article. Headline: "Concealed Corruption? Police K-9 Found with Ties to Secret Military Unit." The piece references documents from an unnamed whistleblower suggesting the dog's evidence is crucial to unraveling a smuggling ring in the chain of command. Cordova hesitated, eyes flicking to the phone screen Olson held out. A tight line formed on her lips as she read, no doubt realizing the damage already done. The journalist must have moved faster than expected. "We have an ongoing national security investigation," she snapped, though her confidence wavered. "This changes nothing." But even her subordinates exchanged looks that betrayed unease. Public scrutiny meant forcibly removing a wounded shepherd, especially one alleged to be central to a corruption scandal, would attract widespread criticism and suspicion. Melanie seized the moment. You can't just whisk him away to a black site now. Too many eyes are watching. If this dog's evidence is crucial, it should be handled with transparency, not secrecy. Her voice rose, passion fueling her courage. Parker's file echoes harness. There's more. The media will want to know why you're seizing him, rather than allowing an open investigation. Cordova's glower darkened. You think a tabloid article will stop us? But she didn't sound as certain as before. Agent number 2 passed Cordova a phone, murmuring something Melanie couldn't hear. Cordova's jaw clenched. We'll be back, she said sharply, pocketing the court order. This isn't over. The agents retreated to their SUV, slamming doors in frustration. As they pulled away, Echo barked again, loud and resonant, as though challenging them to try. A palpable wave of relief swept through Melanie Olson and Deputy Lee. The standoff had ended for the moment. She rushed to the paddock, letting Echo out. The shepherd circled her, whining softly, as if checking she was unhurt. She ran a hand over his fur, breath unsteady. We're okay, boy, she murmured. At least for now. Her eyes found Olson's. How did you convince the reporter to publish so fast? He shrugged. She had enough partial verification from other sources. Once she heard Cordova was moving, she hit go. Next step is ensuring the story spreads beyond our local area. The bigger it gets, the less Cordova can do in the shadows. Melanie nodded, gratitude washing over her. Across the yard, Deputy Lee scrolled through his phone, reading the emerging media coverage. Meanwhile, Uncle Ray was still gone, hopefully decrypting Parker's audio. She stared at the dusty road where Cordova had disappeared and wondered whether the evidence they held would be enough. For Echo's sake, she needed it to be. Morning light broke over the farm, painting the fields in pale gold. Melanie rubbed at weary eyes, having slept only in fits since the tense standoff with Agent Cordova. She emerged from the bunkhouse to find Echo lying by the porch, alert despite the calm atmosphere. The shepherd's gaze followed her, tail wagging once in a cautious greeting. Deputy Lee had slept in his truck, determined to stand guard through the night. Detective Olson had stayed long enough to monitor the immediate aftermath of the article's publication, then left for the station to track Cordova's next moves. Now, with the day fully underway, Melanie's phone buzzed incessantly with messages, support from fellow officers, demands for comment from out-of-town reporters, and updates from acquaintances who'd seen the local Tribune story. She tapped open a text from Olson. State Senator calling for an inquiry. Cordova might shift tactics. No sign of her yet. Stay vigilant. Melanie exhaled heavily. While it was good that the story had reached enough officials to provoke questions, she knew that a cornered adversary could become more dangerous. Across the yard, Deputy Lee hopped down from his pickup's tailgate and approached, resting a hand on his duty belt. We got word from the station, he said. There's a rumor that federal officers might push a new narrative, that Echo is a threat. They could claim he's carrying a biological agent or trained for violence. Melanie winced. The notion of painting Echo as a public safety hazard reeked of desperation, but she couldn't put it past them. Well, let's not give them any chance to film him attacking somebody, she replied. He's well behaved, but that won't stop them from spinning a story. The best defense is continuing to show him as the calm, trained partner he is. Echo, as if on cue, rose and wandered over to Deputy Lee, pressing a wet nose against his hand. Lee gave a small chuckle, patting the shepherd's side. If the public sees him like this, it'll be harder for Cordova to justify seizing him. Soon after, the rumble of a battered pickup announced Uncle Ray's return. He parked near the barn, shoulders visibly slumping from fatigue. Climbing out, he carried a slim laptop case in one hand. Melanie's heart kicked in anticipation. Ray waved them over, leading them into the barn for privacy. Once inside, He set the case on a wooden table. "My buddy worked all night," Ray said, voice subdued. "The device is encrypted all right, some robust system, but we managed to extract an audio file. It took hours of brute force on outdated software. The file is partially corrupted, but there's enough left to confirm Parker's voice." Eagerly, Melanie and Lee gathered around the laptop. Ray opened a folder titled Recovered, revealing a single audio clip. He clicked it and the speaker hissed with static before a man's voice emerged. Though the words wavered in clarity, the tone radiated urgency. "Lieutenant Parker, Code 6, betrayal within the ranks, evidence of shipments. K9 Echo is my crucial, we remain hidden. Top command complicit." Then came a burst of static. Another fragment. "I can't say how long we have. They've threatened me. Threatened to euthanize my partner if we push this. If anyone finds Echo, he holds the key." Melanie's breath caught. The recording crackled again, then fell silent. Ray clicked the file a second time, but only faint static remained. It was enough to confirm that Parker had uncovered a major conspiracy. He referenced shipments, complicity, and the K9. Furthermore, he implied that superiors had threatened to kill Echo to eliminate incriminating ties. Lee whispered, "So Parker tried to smuggle the dog out of that operation. If he'd stayed, they'd have disposed of both." The reality sank in. Those behind the smuggling were so desperate they'd orchestrated Parker's disappearance, expecting no one would question a soldier declared dead in clandestine service. Ray sighed. "The code on the device is layered. My friend says we might salvage additional data with more time, but the partial audio alone is powerful. It shows Parker naming names, top command, though not specific ones, unfortunately." Melanie's mind whirled. This was enough to deepen the scandal if attached to the Tribune's story. Yet Cordova's people would do everything possible to claim the file was doctored or incomplete. "We have to release this carefully," she decided. "If we just dump it online, they'll call it fake. We need forensic experts verifying authenticity." Echo watched them, sensing the tension. Melanie crouched to scratch behind his ears. "Your handler tried so hard to protect you," she murmured, "and now you're helping expose what he found." A swirl of sadness and admiration filled her. She pictured Parker recording that final message under immense pressure, aware that naming any specifics might sign his death warrant. She silently hoped he was still out there, somehow alive. After all, if the conspirators had only captured or chased him off, maybe Parker had survived. The question was, where? Deputy Lee pulled out his phone. "We should call Detective Olson. Have him push the next angle with the reporter. Get the raw audio to a reputable forensics lab. They can confirm it's Parker's voice and that it's unedited." Melanie agreed, passing the laptop to him. Meanwhile, Ray covered the sealed box that once held the recorder. "I'll stow the original device in a safer place," he said. "Don't want to keep all our evidence in one basket. Where do you want to store the laptop?" "Somewhere secure until we get a copy out," Melanie replied. "Then we can see if the rest of the encryption yields more." Her heart pounded at the sheer magnitude of the conspiracy. People in top command had orchestrated smuggling. Parker had tried to blow the whistle and rescue Echo, only to vanish. Now, with partial proof, they stood on the brink of a scandal that could topple powerful figures. The key question was whether those figures included Cordova herself. The day dragged on, but the promised raid never came. The Tribune's piece and talk of the audio file must have forced Cordova into damage control mode. Meanwhile, cable news channels picked up the story, speculating about the mysterious K9 who might reveal government secrets. By mid-afternoon, national outlets requested statements from the local precinct, from the mayor's office, even from the state governor. Detective Olson, in a series of urgent texts, confirmed that officials were forming an investigative task force to ensure no federal overreach occurred without credible explanation. That evening, as the sun cast orange rays across the farmland, Melanie and Echo strolled near a quiet creek that meandered beyond the barn. She needed a moment of calm. The day's revelations had left her both exhilarated and uneasy. Echo padded beside her, his flank brushing her leg, as though seeking the reassurance of contact. When they reached the creek's edge, Melanie tossed a stick. Echo trotted to retrieve it, every muscle poised with that K9 discipline. Upon returning, he dropped the stick gently in her hand and tilted his head, eyes bright. "Sometimes I wonder what you saw over there," Melanie said softly, meeting Echo's gaze. "What missions you went on, what dangers you faced. Parker must have trusted you more than anyone else." Echo waited silent. She stroked his fur. "We'll do right by him, by both of you." In the hush of twilight, with insects chirping and the water murmuring over stones, she felt a powerful connection. All that courage and loyalty distilled into one dog who carried so many secrets. She bent down, pressing her forehead lightly against Echo's, tears gathering in her lashes. "We won't let them bury this again." Back at the barn, Uncle Ray was poring over a worn map and some scribbled notes. Deputy Lee hovered, arms folded, reading from his phone. "Olson texted," Lee said. "He's hearing rumors that Cordova could attempt a stealth operation tonight. No official warrant, but a forced entry if they think we're vulnerable. They might claim they're recovering classified property." Melanie's jaw tightened. "Then we need watchers on each approach to the farm. We'll call the neighbors, see if they'll keep an eye out. If Cordova tries a midnight strike, we'll be ready." Ray tapped the map. "There's a narrow back road leading in from the east, plus a dirt track on the west side. If I set up some motion-activated lights, they'll lose the element of surprise." They sprang into action, stringing up lights around the perimeter. Uncle Ray's background in security was invaluable. He rigged a few flood lamps with sensors that would flare if a vehicle passed. Meanwhile, Melanie texted the local dispatch, letting them know she'd be off duty, but needed immediate alerts for suspicious calls in the area. Darkness settled over the property, thick and foreboding. From a vantage point on the upstairs porch of the main house, Melanie surveyed the horizon through binoculars. Every gust of wind made her jumpy, and Echo prowled by her side, tense. Below, Ray and Lee exchanged coffee and manned a small generator that powered the new floodlights. The memory of the black SUVs lingered in her mind. Cordova had seemed rattled earlier, but that only heightened the possibility of a secret raid. If she couldn't seize Echo in broad daylight, maybe she'd try under cover of darkness. Midnight came and went, each hour feeling like an eternity. A faint moon offered minimal illumination, and the far-off croak of frogs punctuated the hush. Melanie's phone vibrated with updates from Olson. The reporter had passed along an early clip of the recovered audio to a certified forensics lab. Confirmation of authenticity could arrive by morning, at which point the file might go public in major news outlets. If they held out until then, the net of accountability would close around Cordova's superiors. That knowledge both thrilled and frightened Melanie. The stakes were enormous. Sometime after 2 a.m, a rustle at the edge of the farm triggered one of the floodlights. Melanie froze, heart hammering. She pressed the binoculars to her eyes, scouring the fence line where the bright beam fanned across tall grass. For several seconds, she saw nothing but swirling dust and the edges of the field. Then a shape scurried, not a person, but a lone fox startled by the sudden glare. It darted away, and the sensor light clicked off again. Melanie let out a tense breath, exhaustion tugging at her. Echo looked to her for direction, ears perked, and she offered a soft pat on his side. "False alarm," she murmured. "Keep watch, though." By 4, her eyes felt gritty. yet she refused to abandon her post. The sky hinted at the earliest glimmer of dawn. No further motion had triggered the floodlights, and the farm lay still. Maybe Cordova had decided not to risk a clandestine intrusion after all. Or maybe she was waiting. Either way, the news that day would likely carry more developments, and if the audio got verified, the entire dynamic might flip in their favor. Echo dozed beside her, half awake, every so often lifting his head to sniff the breeze. His quiet presence kept her grounded. Dawn came on slow and overcast, as though the sky itself were uncertain about revealing a new day. Melanie stood on the upstairs porch, bones aching from hours of vigilance. The hush of the farm was broken only by distant roosters crowing and the low hum of the portable generator that powered the motion-activated floodlights. She glanced over at Echo, curled up on a blanket. His ears twitched each time a breeze rustled the nearby trees. Though she was exhausted, gratitude swelled in her chest for the dog's presence. Together, they had faced down one more night without intrusion. Deputy Lee emerged from behind the barn, carrying a thermos of coffee he had brewed on a small propane stove. His eyes were rimmed with fatigue. "Morning, Mel," he greeted. "All quiet except for that fox earlier." He extended the thermos, and Melanie accepted gratefully, sipping the hot liquid. The bitterness startled her awake, and she closed her eyes for a moment to refocus her thoughts. "Cordova might be waiting for the dust to settle," she said softly, "or planning something bigger. Either way, we need to confirm that Parker's audio is real and let the world know." Lee exhaled, leaning against the railing. "Olson said the forensics lab was working through the night. We should hear something soon." His phone buzzed. Fishing it from his pocket, he scanned the screen. "Speak of the devil. He wants us at the station as soon as possible. Says the file is explosive." Without waiting, Melanie strode inside to grab her jacket. Echo trotted after her, tail wagging faintly, as though ready to follow. But she paused, looking at him with regret. "I should leave you here, boy. Cordova could be watching the roads." Echo stared back, understanding perhaps her worry, but not the rationale. Finally, she let out a shaky breath. "You're safer here. Uncle Ray will watch over you. I promise I'll come back." Downstairs, Ray was checking the generator. He raised an eyebrow when Melanie explained that she and Lee needed to go to the station. "I'll keep an eye on Echo," he agreed. "And if Cordova shows up, we'll call you in a heartbeat." With a nod of thanks, Melanie gave Echo one last pat before heading to her sedan with Lee. Her heart ached at the idea of leaving the dog behind, but every instinct told her to keep him off the main roads for now. If the station's news was as big as Olson implied, they might provoke another wave of federal aggression. They made the drive in tense silence, scanning the roads for any hint of a black SUV. Though traffic was sparse, each passing vehicle set their nerves on edge. Lee checked the rearview mirror repeatedly. Only when the modest green sign for Crescent Falls city limits appeared did they exhale. The station was quieter than usual, with many off-duty officers at home. Still, Melanie and Lee parked behind the building, entering through a side door. Olson waved them into a small conference room used mainly for departmental meetings. His expression was equal parts exhilaration and dread. On a table sat a laptop with a set of headphones plugged in. Olson tapped the keyboard, leaning closer. "The forensics lab confirmed the partial audio from Parker is legitimate," he announced, voice hushed. "And there's more. They managed to repair a second segment we didn't know existed." Melanie's pulse throbbed in her temples. "Another voice clip?" "Yes," Olson said grimly. "Listen." He pressed play. There was static, then Parker's voice, roughened by strain. "Major R. Carter, leading the ring, shipments from Eastern Europe. They threatened families to keep quiet. If Echo is found, it means I couldn't finish my job. Expose them, don't let..." The file ended abruptly. Melanie felt goosebumps on her arms. A name, Major R. Carter. That was a concrete lead. She and Lee exchanged glances. If Parker was naming a major, this was beyond a rogue soldier or two. "We need to cross-reference the name Carter with the suspicious flights or shipments," she said. Olson nodded. "Exactly. It aligns with some data the Tribune reporter found. References to a Carter who oversaw certain transport missions overseas." He rubbed his eyes. "National news outlets are picking up the story, and a few independent online journalists are dissecting the smuggling angle. We might be on the cusp of blowing it wide open." They spent the next hour combing through old digital archives, searching for references to Major R. Carter connected to RAVEN or secret cargo flights. Each time they unearthed a snippet, it fit Parker's puzzle: logs of unusual shipments, blacked-out manifests, and hush-hush communications. Melanie made sure to keep everything in a dedicated folder for the Tribune reporter, who had become a crucial ally. Though her heart pounded with every revelation, she couldn't shake a looming sense of danger. If Carter's ring realized how close they were to unveiling the truth, they could lash out at anyone holding evidence, Echo included. By noon, swirling rumors rattled the station's corridors. A clerk reported overhearing a call about federal agents requesting direct access to local SWAT teams. Another mention of Cordova came from a detective who claimed she was making calls to the mayor's office. Melanie's tension climbed steadily. She typed notes feverishly at a desk, phone buzzing with non-stop messages. The Tribune published a follow-up piece referencing Parker's second audio fragment, and mainstream networks started calling the station for interviews. A swirl of chaos brewed in the dusty main lobby, with junior officers unsure how to handle the flood of media requests. Then, the call Melanie dreaded arrived. Uncle Ray's number lit her screen. She answered, pressing the phone tight to her ear. "Melanie," Ray said, voice edged with alarm. "3 black SUVs just turned onto the farm road. They're approaching. I'm not sure if it's Cordova or others, but they came in fast." Melanie leapt to her feet, nearly knocking over her chair. "Get Echo, lock down the barn. If they try to force entry—" She caught herself, panic swirling. "No, wait. Can you slip out the back route?" Ray paused. "Might be too late. The second SUV turned onto that dirt track. They're boxing us in." Background static crackled, and she heard Echo barking. "The lead SUV has agents stepping out," Ray continued. "They're armed. Looks serious." Melanie's throat constricted. She motioned to Lee and Olson, who instantly understood. They scrambled for the door while she pressed the phone closer. "Hide in the barn. I'm on my way." She ended the call and sprinted, adrenaline surging so fiercely that her vision sharpened. Olson threw her the keys to an unmarked cruiser. "You drive, I'll follow in my car. Let's go." The three of them dashed out. Time felt like a blur as they sped from the station, sirens off to avoid giving away their approach. Melanie's thoughts whirled. Ray cornered, Echo in danger, and potentially no legal shield strong enough to stop armed agents acting under shady orders. The horizon passed in a smear of farmland, each mile an eternity. Lee kept repeating, "We'll get there in time," as though chanting a mantra. 10 minutes out, the farmland's rolling hills came into view. The unmarked cruiser roared down the narrow road, dust billowing behind. Finally, they spotted the turnoff to Ray's property, where 2 black SUVs blocked the main driveway. The third sat angled near the dirt track, effectively cornering the entire entrance. Agents in dark tactical gear stood with rifles lowered, scanning the area. Lee cursed under his breath. Olson pulled up behind them, stepping out with his badge in hand. Melanie hopped out too, heart in her throat. One agent barked an order. "Stay back. This is federal jurisdiction." Melanie refused to comply, calling out, "I'm Officer Melanie Brooks. I have probable cause to be here. This property is privately owned, and I have permission to access it. Where is my uncle?" The agent's eyes flicked to the other men. Another agent gestured roughly with his weapon. We have reason to believe a dangerous K9 is on these premises, property of a classified unit. Melanie's rage flared. That dog is not dangerous. He's a victim of a criminal conspiracy. You have no right to storm in here. Through the parted SUVs, she saw Uncle Ray near the barn entrance, arms raised in a defensive posture, and Echo at his side, barking at the intrusion. 2 more agents circled from the rear, presumably having checked for alternate exits. The lead agent advanced a step, weapon braced. "Stand down. Hand the dog over." Ray glowered. "You'll have to take him by force, and I guarantee that won't go unnoticed." Indeed, a swirl of dust hinted at approaching vehicles. Neighbors or maybe media hot on the story's scent. Olson stepped up, brandishing printed copies of the Tribune's most recent article. "That dog is evidence, tied to allegations of a major smuggling ring. If you seize him illegally, the press will broadcast it nationwide. Then you'll have to explain your methods. Are you prepared to face public scrutiny for forcibly removing a disabled K9? The agent hesitated, scanning the area. Another car, likely a neighbor's battered sedan, pulled up, the driver filming everything on a smartphone. Within minutes, more neighbors arrived. At least half a dozen onlookers gathered, forming an impromptu audience. Melanie quickly threaded through the SUVs, ignoring the outraged shouts. She reached Ray's side, gently placing a hand on Echo's harness. The dog snapped his head toward her, eyes bright with relief, though his body trembled at the tension in the air. She noticed the agents conferring in hushed tones. One barked into a radio. "We have civilians filming. The area is compromised." Another voice hissed back, something about falling back to regroup. For a moment, Melanie doubted her ears. Could it be that public scrutiny was exactly what they needed to force these agents to retreat? Sure enough, the agent who seemed in charge straightened, scanning the watchers. "We'll be back with an official warrant," he announced loudly, voice dripping with frustration. "This property is on notice." Then, as quickly as they had arrived, the 3 SUVs pulled away, engines snarling, dust plumed in their wake. Ray lowered his arms, letting out a shaky breath. Echo barked once, a short, sharp sound that spoke volumes about his own tension. Melanie pressed her face into the shepherd's fur, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. They had won another standoff, but the conflict was far from over. Neighbors rushed up, voices buzzing with excitement and alarm. "We saw the news," someone said. "We came to check you weren't alone." Ray offered them his thanks. The phone cameras continued recording, capturing every detail of the federal retreat. After the uproar subsided, Olson pulled Melanie aside, voice low. "This can't keep happening. They'll come back better prepared or try a different angle. We have to escalate. The new audio snippet naming Major Carter is big, but we need more. If Carter and Cordova are connected, they'll do anything to bury this." Melanie met his gaze, adrenaline still coursing. "Then we finish what Parker started. We get that story national. We contact every official who will listen, and maybe, just maybe, we find Parker himself." That evening, the barn at Uncle Ray's farm became a makeshift headquarters. A single overhead lamp cast a warm glow on the group gathered around a long wooden table strewn with laptops, printed articles, and scribbled notes. The scent of hay mixed with the aroma of fresh coffee as Melanie, Ray, Detective Olson, and Deputy Lee strategized under Echo's quiet watch. Periodically, the shepherd would rise, limp around the barn's perimeter as if on patrol, then settle back at Melanie's side. Outside, the late summer sun dipped below rolling fields, staining the horizon a deep orange, but no one here felt any relief in the day's end. Earlier, they'd barely averted a standoff when armed agents cornered the property. Only the sudden arrival of locals and phone cameras had forced the feds to retreat. That victory felt temporary at best. "All right," said Olson, scratching his stubble as he squinted at a laptop screen. "We now have 2 partial recordings from Parker. Both mention a ring of high-level officers trafficking contraband, and threatening to kill the K-9 to hide their tracks. He names a Major R. Carter as a central figure. The Tribune has begun linking this to suspicious overseas missions. Pressure is building. Uncle Ray leaned forward, hands folded on the table. They'll do anything to silence this, especially if Carter is well connected. Cordova might just be one pawn. We need to get higher authorities involved, someone who can't be easily bought or threatened. Deputy Lee snapped his fingers. What if we contact an honest figure in the military chain of command or a senator known for investigating corruption? Let them know this story's about to explode. They might shield Echo under official protection, publicly, so it can't be reversed quietly in the dark. Melanie tapped a pen against her notepad, considering the suggestion. My worry is that we don't know who's compromised. We need a name we can trust. She looked at Olson. Any ideas? The state senator is interested, but we're dealing with a federal matter, international even. Olson shrugged. I reached out to a colonel I once interviewed for a different case, a Colonel Ramirez, who's been outspoken about cleaning up corruption. I'm waiting to hear back. Maybe he can advise us on the best route to go up the chain. Ray cleared his throat. I also asked my cryptographer friend if he could salvage anything else from the device. He's still working on it. If Parker left more details, like operation names or the full identity of Carter, that might accelerate matters. He paused to glance at Echo, who watched intently. Parker risked his life to protect this dog and gather that evidence. We owe it to him to see it through. A faint bark from Echo broke the momentary silence. Melanie patted his flank, offering a reassuring smile. Soon, boy. We'll make sure all this leads somewhere. Night descended with a new tension, as though the farm itself braced for another incursion. Instead of turning in, they took shifts monitoring the property again. Though exhaustion weighed on her bones, Melanie volunteered for the first watch, pacing outside with Echo. The stars glimmered faintly, half concealed by thin clouds. It might have been a peaceful night if not for the undercurrent of dread. She checked her phone repeatedly, hoping to see an incoming call or text, that some larger agency was stepping in to protect Echo officially. Nothing. She caught herself glancing at Echo every few steps. By now, she was used to his presence, his calm shadow by her side. She wondered if he realized how pivotal he was in exposing Parker's story. Each time she thought of Parker, an ache filled her chest. If he'd sacrificed everything to save this dog, maybe he was out there still fighting. Or maybe his final gift was ensuring Echo lived on to reveal the truth. Close to midnight, a flurry of activity stirred inside the barn. She and Echo rushed in to see Olson hunched over a laptop, cell phone pressed to his ear. Yes, Colonel Ramirez, he was saying. We can confirm that a portion of the audio explicitly mentions Major Carter. Understood. I'll let them know. He ended the call, exhaling. Ramirez wants to meet us in person. Says he can't guarantee security over the phone. He's 3 states away, but he's willing to drive halfway if we can do the same. Says he'll bring documentation that proves Carter's rank and rumored involvement in off-book missions. Ray nodded slowly. A face-to-face might be our best bet. If Ramirez validates Carter's identity and chain of command, we can pressure the right offices. Then Carter can't hide behind secrecy. Melanie glanced at Echo. The idea of traveling felt risky. We can't leave Echo alone here, and we can't bring him out in public with Cordova hunting him. Olson raised a hand. Ramirez suggests a secure location, somewhere discreet. Maybe a small motel off the interstate, a couple of hours from here. We meet, share info, and plan the next step. Deputy Lee pursed his lips. That's still a gamble. Could be walking into a trap if Ramirez is compromised. But I got a good read on him from what Olson shared. He's known for blowing the whistle on internal corruption. After rapid discussion, they agreed. Melanie, Olson, and Echo would make the trip to meet Ramirez. Lee and Ray would remain at the farm, coordinating with the Tribune and standing guard. If Cordova reappeared, they'd stall, claiming Echo was off for veterinary care. It was a shaky plan, but under the circumstances it felt like the only way forward. So it was that, hours before dawn, Melanie and Olson packed essentials into an unmarked SUV borrowed from a sympathetic friend. Echo hopped into the back seat, ears alert. Before they left, Deputy Lee pulled Melanie aside. "Be careful," he said, voice thick with concern. "If anything goes sideways, call immediately." She squeezed his hand in thanks. "Watch yourselves too. Cordova might strike here to find out where we went." The drive commenced along back roads, headlights slicing through a pre-dawn gloom. Olson took the wheel initially, letting Melanie ride in back with Echo. The shepherd occasionally poked his nose at the window, as though intrigued by this nighttime adventure. Melanie rested a hand on his back, murmuring words of reassurance neither expected an answer to. But each passing minute felt like stepping deeper into the unknown. Shortly after sunrise, they stopped at a vacant rest area. The sky was still tinged pink, the parking lot empty except for a single rusted pickup. Melanie walked Echo around the perimeter, letting him stretch and sniff the air. Olson texted Colonel Ramirez their ETA, receiving a prompt reply with coordinates for a secluded motel near a place called Maplewood Junction. The plan was straightforward: meet in a public enough area that any overt raid would draw attention, but quiet enough to talk safely. 2 hours later, Melanie glanced at the dashboard clock as they neared the small highway exit for Maplewood. Sparse traffic and a fading billboard welcomed them to the best family stop in the county, though the peeling paint suggested fewer visitors these days. The motel appeared on a slight rise, a single-story row of rooms, each door facing the parking lot. The lot itself was half empty, mostly work trucks. As Olson parked, Melanie scanned for signs of a trap: tinted windows, suspicious silhouettes, anything that screamed federal sting. All she saw was a lone black SUV on the far side, with a short, stout man waiting next to it. He wore a casual jacket and jeans, posture stiff. As they pulled in, he lifted a hand, beckoning. Stepping out, Echo at her side, Melanie approached warily. Olson followed, one hand near his concealed sidearm. The man introduced himself softly. "Colonel Ramirez, good to meet you." His eyes briefly flicked to Echo, a mix of sympathy and curiosity flickering there. "So you're the ones protecting Parker's partner?" Melanie nodded. "We appreciate you coming. If you're who you say, we need help verifying Parker's allegations. We have partial recordings naming Major R. Carter in a smuggling ring." Ramirez motioned them toward a corner near the motel's ice machine, out of earshot of passers-by. The scent of stale soda syrup clung to the humid air. "I've served under Carter before," he began, crossing his arms. "I suspected something was off, but never had proof. People would vanish or face sudden reassignments if they asked too many questions. Then I heard rumors about Parker, a brilliant handler who disappeared mid-deployment. When your contact reached me, I dug deeper. I have old rosters, flight logs, nothing conclusive by itself, but all pointing to Carter's involvement in covert shipments." He handed over a slim folder. "If we combine it with your audio, we may have a case strong enough to trigger an official military probe." Olson flipped through the folder, eyes widening at references to operation code names and suspicious inventory lists. "We need a name higher than Carter's," he said. "Even if we prove Carter orchestrated smuggling, we need someone in the chain of command willing to prosecute him, or it'll get buried in red tape." Ramirez grimaced. "That's the danger. But if you release these logs publicly without the top brass on your side, Carter's allies might brand it all as stolen intelligence. A mass cover-up could ensue, or—" He paused, gaze sliding to Echo. "They might resort to more drastic measures to silence this once and for all." Echo let out a low huff, almost as if he understood. Melanie stroked his neck. "Then what do you suggest?" After a moment's thought, Ramirez lowered his voice. There's a senator on the Armed Services Committee known for investigating corruption, Senator Blake. She has a reputation for integrity, and her staff includes veterans who despise illegal ops. If we get this evidence to Blake, she can pressure the Department of Defense for a formal inquiry. That would offer legal protection for the dog and for anyone holding evidence. Melanie nodded slowly. So we go bigger. Get the logs and audio into Senator Blake's hands. She demands an investigation and Carter has nowhere to hide. Her heart pounded. But we need a direct line to her. Ramirez half smiled. I can try to set up a call. She owes me a favor from my whistleblowing days, but it won't be immediate, and we have to be discreet. If Carter's network catches wind of this before it's official, you or the dog could become a target. Olson's phone vibrated, drawing everyone's focus. He glanced at it, grimacing. Breaking news. Federal agents searched the precinct back home, took copies of our K9 files, Cordova's name all over it. Melanie's stomach lurched. That means they're trying to build a case to seize Echo by any means necessary. She looked at Ramirez, chest tight. We can't go back right now, they'll be waiting. Echo nudged her leg, as if sensing her distress. The colonel nodded in understanding. Lay low. Let me reach out to Senator Blake. Once I have a secure channel, I'll contact you. Until then, keep the dog hidden and the evidence safe. If you get cornered, release the logs and recordings to the media in full. Sometimes a bright spotlight is the only defense. They exchanged contact details carefully, avoiding anything that might be easily traced. Melanie shook Ramirez's hand. Thank you, she said quietly. This might be our only shot. The colonel's eyes drifted to Echo. Parker was a good man by all accounts. He deserved better. Let's see this through for both of them. After Ramirez departed, Melanie and Olson retreated to their SUV. Echo climbed onto the back seat, gaze reflecting quiet patience. Where to now? Olson asked softly. She stared out at the empty highway beyond. We'll have to find a safe place outside Crescent Falls. Cordova's no doubt searching everything near home. Her thoughts drifted to Uncle Ray and Deputy Lee. They'd handle the farm, but it was too dangerous for her to return with Echo. At least, not yet. Driving away from Maplewood, Melanie fought the urge to push the pedal to the floor. Overhead, clouds thickened, mirroring her turmoil. She looked at Olson in the passenger seat, then at Echo through the rearview mirror. I never asked for any of this, she murmured, but I can't turn my back now. Olson reached over to give her shoulder a supportive squeeze. None of us did, but we're in it, one step at a time. Melanie gripped the steering wheel as the unmarked SUV coursed along the winding highway. The early afternoon sky hung low and gray, the kind that promised rain but never quite delivered. Seated beside her, Detective Olson balanced a road map on his knees, crossing out routes that veered too close to busy population centers. In the back seat, Echo lay with his muzzle resting on the armrest, ears flicking at each shift in speed. They had no definitive destination yet, just a shared resolve to stay off main roads and keep their lines of communication open with Colonel Ramirez. Before leaving Maplewood, Ramirez had given them a coded phone number to use only once, in case they were in serious peril. Melanie prayed it wouldn't come to that. The plan was to find a safe, unremarkable motel or campground, remain hidden for a day or two, then decide the next move once the senator or the Tribune reporter signaled a breakthrough. Through the rearview mirror, she caught a glimpse of Echo licking his chops, his expression calm. Despite everything, the shepherd's quiet steadiness gave her courage. She remembered how frightened he'd looked when they first found him in the woods, starved and injured. Now he was a beacon of loyalty and, inadvertently, a linchpin in a national scandal. They stopped at a small-town grocer to buy sandwiches and water. Olson went inside while Melanie circled the block, ensuring no suspicious vehicles lingered. Echo observed the pedestrian's tail occasionally thumping against the seat when a passerby with a child strolled by. 20 minutes later, Olson emerged, wearing a subdued grin as he carried a paper sack of supplies. No sign of black SUVs, he reported, climbing in. But the store's TV was on a national news channel. They briefly mentioned the ongoing investigation into alleged military smuggling. No names yet, but I think the story's catching on. Melanie started the engine again, pulling onto a deserted side road. Good, she said. The more coverage, the less freedom Carter and Cordova have to operate in the shadows. She glanced back at Echo. And maybe the closer we get to finding out if Parker is truly gone or still out there. A tense silence followed as they recalled Parker's recorded words, naming Major Carter and pleading for Echo's safety. Every so often, the image of Parker's possible fate haunted Melanie. Had he been chased across borders, held captive, or was he lost with no one to trust? They chose a modest RV park just off a stretch of rural highway, figuring that an RV park might be less conspicuous than a motel. Besides, after so many hours on the road, they needed to let Echo stretch his legs. Paying cash at the tiny office, Olson explained they were just passing through. The clerk gave them a key to a bare-bones cabin, perched at the far end of the property beneath lanky pine trees. Once inside, Melanie slid the bolt on the door and peered out through a crack in the curtains. A few families camped in RVs, but no sign of official vehicles. Echo sniffed every corner of the small cabin, from the scuffed linoleum to the patched sofa. A dusty kitchenette contained a half-functioning fridge, and two narrow beds filled most of the main room. Melanie tested the light switch. It flickered but stayed on. She exhaled, uneasy, but relieved to have found some refuge. Olson double-checked the windows and placed a map on the tiny table. "We're about 200 miles from home," he said, tracing a route with his fingertip. Ramirez suggested the wait could be at least 48 hours until he sets up a call with Senator Blake. "If we can hold out here, we might avoid drawing attention." They settled Echo with his own blanket near the sofa, giving him space to lie down. Then, in hushed voices, they shared updates with Uncle Ray and Deputy Lee by phone. Ray reported that the farm had seen no fresh intrusions, though suspicious cars occasionally slowed near the gate. Lee mentioned a swirl of rumors in the station. Federal agents had pressed the sheriff to disclose everything about Melanie's whereabouts. Fortunately, the sheriff claimed ignorance. "They're getting desperate," Lee said over the crackling line. "If they track your phone or license plates, they might close in." Melanie turned off her phone afterward, anxious about being traced. She and Olson agreed to switch it on only at set intervals. In the quiet that followed, the two of them slumped onto the cabin's rickety chairs. Echo, sensing the shift in mood, walked over and laid his head on Melanie's lap. She scratched behind his ear, thankful for his warmth. Olson rummaged in the paper sack, handing her a sandwich. They ate in near silence, too drained to talk. When night fell, the starlight was bright enough to outline the pines in silver, but no one felt safe enough to step outside for a stroll. As if attuned to their tension, Echo alternated between the door and the window, nose twitching at the night air. At one point, Melanie dared a peek outside. She spotted a couple of campers smoking by a flickering fire, but no unfamiliar headlights. Still, her gut churned with the knowledge that Cordova's team might appear at any moment. The night wore on, and the cramped cabin offered no real comfort. Yet Melanie stayed awake, curled in the corner of the sofa, with Echo pressed against her legs. Sometime past midnight, Olson dozed off in a chair, arms folded. Melanie's eyelids grew heavy, and despite her best efforts, she slipped into a troubled sleep, where echoes of the recorded voice replayed over and over, Parker's muffled pleas tangled with images of black SUVs prowling the farm, while Echo barked in a dark, endless forest. She awoke abruptly to the sound of a car passing outside. Her heart hammered, but the car didn't stop. Echo merely lifted his head, ears pricked, then relaxed again. She forced herself to breathe, quietly acknowledging that her life had spun entirely out of control. In the stillness, she rested a hand on Echo's flank and made a silent vow that they'd all come through this, no matter the cost. By the next morning, the cabin felt stifling. Olson walked to the RV park's office to top up their stay another night, while Melanie coaxed Echo into a small, fenced dog run behind the main building. The shepherd trotted obediently, though he seemed to sense that they were lingering in a precarious place. The run itself was little more than chain link around a patch of dusty grass, but it allowed him some freedom to move. She tossed a rubber ball, her mind drifting to thoughts of how different their circumstances might have been had Parker's superiors not turned corrupt. When she returned to the cabin, Olson stood by the door, face grim. Lee texted, "Cordova's petitioning a federal judge to classify Echo as essential evidence in a national security matter. If that gets approved, any local or state authority has to step aside if they show up with a retrieval order." Melanie slung her jacket over a chair, a fresh wave of anger surging. They'll turn him into a mere piece of property, when in fact he's a living witness. The press coverage should help, but... She stopped as her phone vibrated from the table. She and Olson exchanged nervous glances. Then she switched it on, bracing for trouble. Instead, it displayed a message from an unknown number. "Ramirez, urgent. Senator wants to talk. Stand by for call." Relief washed over her. "Finally," she breathed. "We might get the backing we need." Olson nodded, adjusting the phone's speaker setting. The device rang moments later. Melanie answered, finding Colonel Ramirez on the other end. His tone was subdued yet focused. "I have Senator Blake with me. She's read your materials and listened to Parker's partial recordings. She'd like to hear from you directly." There was a click, then a warm, authoritative female voice. "This is Senator Blake. I understand you've uncovered evidence implicating a Major Carter in illegal smuggling operations, and you have custody of a K-9 central to the case. I want to confirm the authenticity of your claims." Heart thrumming, Melanie recapped the entire journey, finding Echo, discovering Parker's audio device, facing repeated attempts by Cordova to seize the dog. The senator listened intently, occasionally murmuring surprise or concern. When Melanie finished, Senator Blake said, "I appreciate your candor. I have some pull in the Department of Defense. I can push for an immediate inquiry into Carter's activities, but I'll need everything you have. The shipping logs, the audio, Colonel Ramirez's evidence, and I need the dog safe. If the K-9 truly is a living link to Parker's testimony, he might still hold intangible clues, commands, training triggers. Who knows? Carter's people would prefer him silenced." Melanie glanced at Echo, who was dozing in a patch of sunlight near the door, unaware of the high-stakes conversation. "We'll send the evidence. How can we ensure you'll protect him?" The senator's voice softened. "If Carter is as powerful as we suspect, he'll try every angle. But if I can get the Judiciary Committee and Armed Services on board, we'll classify the dog under special witness protection. It won't be easy, but once it's done, nobody can lay a finger on him without oversight." Olson's eyes lit with hope. Melanie exhaled, tension easing from her shoulders. "That's all we want. A fair chance for the truth to come out." Senator Blake paused. "I'm heading back to Washington tonight. If you forward copies of all evidence to me through the secure link Ramirez will provide, I'll push it forward. Once I get official traction, I'll let you know how to proceed. Until then, keep the dog hidden and keep yourselves safe. We don't know how far Carter's network extends." The call ended with hurried goodbyes and an implicit promise that help was on the horizon. The moment the line went dead, Melanie leaned on the table, face in her hands. Relief, apprehension, and sheer exhaustion mingled within her. Olson grinned, albeit wearily. "We might have just found an ally with real clout." She nodded, raising her head. "Let's not celebrate prematurely, but it's a chance. Let's compile all the logs and recordings. Colonel Ramirez can finalize them, then we'll upload everything." Echo stirred as though awakened by the burst of optimism. Melanie smiled at him, crossing the small cabin to kneel by his side. "You hear that, boy? Maybe soon we'll get you the official protection you deserve." Echo blinked, muzzle resting against her forearm. The next 12 hours were a blur of hushed collaboration and digital maneuvers. Melanie and Olson hunkered down in the cramped RV park cabin, laptops balanced on the wobbly dining table. They combed through every file they and Colonel Ramirez had compiled. Old shipping logs, Parker's partial recordings, testimonies from ex-personnel who'd briefly come forward, plus the revealing second audio snippet implicating Major R. Carter. As they worked, Echo sprawled on a patch of floor near the window, occasionally raising his head at the faint sound of passing campers or distant car engines. By mid-afternoon, they had assembled all data into encrypted folders. Ramirez texted them the secure link to a government server used by Senator Blake's staff for high-level inquiries. Uploading took nearly an hour, courtesy of the campground's spotty internet. Each percentage point on the progress bar felt like a small victory, and a silent plea that nothing would interrupt them at the last second. When the final file flashed complete, Melanie exchanged a shaky smile with Olson. Outside, storm clouds gathered, reflecting the tension still lingering in her gut. Though they had done their part, sending the evidence to the senator, she knew Carter's network wouldn't simply yield. The ring of corruption Parker had uncovered spanned multiple ranks, possibly crossing agencies. If they realized their scheme was on the brink of exposure, they could strike back in one desperate push. As evening descended, Echo became restless. He nudged Melanie's leg as if prompting her to step outside. "Guess he needs a walk," she said, gently scratching his neck. Olson offered a quick nod. "We've been cooped up all day. I'll watch from here. Just keep within sight of the cabin." Slipping on her jacket, Melanie clipped a leash to Echo's collar, more for the appearance of normalcy than any real need to restrain him. The RV park had a few other guests milling about, mostly retirees in travel trailers. They nodded politely at the woman and her German shepherd, likely assuming they were just another passing pair. A brisk wind rattled the pine branches as she led Echo around the gravel perimeter, stepping around puddles left by a light rain. Each breath of fresh air steadied her nerves. Echo sniffed eagerly, picking up scents of wildlife and lingering barbecue smoke. When they neared the edge of the property, Melanie spotted a battered station wagon with out-of-state plates. Beside it stood an older couple, fussing with a stubborn cooler. Echo paused, ears flicking forward, but the couple gave a friendly wave. Melanie waved back, relieved at the mundane sight. She forced herself to relax, reminding her racing mind that not every vehicle or stranger spelled danger. Returning to the cabin, she found Olson pacing inside. "Ramirez just texted," he said, voice taut. "Senator Blake reviewed the files and is calling an emergency closed-door briefing with some committee members tonight. If all goes well, we'll get an official directive placing Echo under special witness protection." Hope flickered in Melanie's chest. "That's the best news we've had since this started." She unhooked Echo's leash, and the dog circled once, settling on the old rug near the sofa. "Let's pray it actually goes through," she murmured. Night fell without fanfare. Rain drummed softly on the cabin roof, and thunder rumbled in the distance. Melanie found herself wishing for a moment of normalcy. A quiet dinner, a warm bed, none of this cloak and dagger tension. Yet here she was, half dozing against the armrest, pistol by her side, Echo's presence as her only real comfort. Olson sank into restless sleep on the other bed, phone clutched in his hand. The looming threat of Cordova returning had kept them both on edge. Around midnight, a series of text notifications jolted them awake. Olson rubbed his eyes, reading aloud. Senator Staffer says the briefing got heated. Some high-ranking officials pushed to suppress the info, claiming it was incomplete or a matter of national security. But Blake refused to back down, demanded an impartial investigation. The staffer says a preliminary injunction might be issued to protect Echo until final decisions are made. Melanie exhaled. So we're not fully safe, but it's a start. A minute later, Olson's phone flashed again. He frowned at the screen. Lee just messaged. Says someone claiming to be from Internal Affairs showed up at the station, asking about you and Echo. He's stalling them. Anxiety coiled in Melanie's stomach. How many more agencies are going to poke around? This is turning into a multi-headed beast. She felt Echo stir by her side, tail thumping once. I guess we hold on until we get an official notice from Blake or Ramirez telling us we're in the clear. In the hush that followed, thunder boomed closer and the rain intensified. Melanie pulled her jacket tighter, glancing at the flimsy cabin door. I can't shake the feeling that something's coming, she admitted softly. Olson nodded. We should pack up. Be ready to leave at a moment's notice if it goes south. No reason to get trapped. They spent the next half hour gathering their few belongings, stowing laptops and sensitive papers into a backpack. Echo eyed them curiously, whiskers quivering whenever lightning lit the windows. Then came the distinct crunch of tires on wet gravel outside. Melanie exchanged a sharp glance with Olson. He quickly killed the overhead light and both dropped to a crouch near the curtained window. Echo stood, hackles rising slightly, silently alert. Through a gap in the curtain, they glimpsed a pair of headlights angled toward the cabin. A shape moved behind the beams, maybe more than one. Melanie's heart pounded. Was this just another camper arriving or something else? The wind rattled the cabin door. Melanie heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate. Olson reached for his gun, flicking off the safety. Echo let out a low, warning growl. A male voice called out, "Hello? Car trouble over here." The ruse sounded forced. Melanie stood by the door, adrenaline surging. She whispered to Olson, "Sounds like a trap. Let's see if they knock." Another thud on the wood. "Please, anyone inside? We need help with a tire." Melanie counted to 3, then stepped carefully onto the porch with her gun drawn, leaving Echo behind with Olson. She pointed her flashlight outward, illuminating 2 figures standing by the SUV. Dread knotted her stomach. They wore civilian clothes, but their postures screamed law enforcement or military training. One raised his hands in a pretense of non-aggression. "Sorry, ma'am," he said, stepping closer than comfortable. "We saw the light under your door, thought you might give us a hand." The second figure shifted slightly, as though maneuvering to get a clearer look inside the cabin. Something about the entire scenario felt off, especially at 1 a.m. in a near-empty campground. Melanie kept her gun at her side, but visible. "I'm a police officer," she stated flatly. "Step back. If you really have a tire issue, you can call roadside assistance. We're in no position to help." Her instincts screamed danger. The first man's expression flickered. "Police? That's convenient," he said softly. Then his gaze darted to the side and a third figure emerged from behind the SUV. Melanie cursed under her breath. There were more than 2. Flashlight beams cut across the scene. She heard Olson's footsteps inside, Echo growling a warning. All at once, the tension snapped. The third figure lunged forward, yelling, "We know you have the dog." Melanie jerked sideways, raising her weapon. The porch light reflected off a glint of metal in the intruder's hand, maybe a gun. She shouted, "Back off!" But a shot rang out, splintering the wooden porch rail. Lightning flashed overhead, thunder shaking the air. Inside, Echo barked furiously. Footsteps pounded as Olsen pressed forward, returning fire with a short volley aimed at the SUV's hood, forcing the attackers to duck behind it. Chaos erupted. The two men near Melanie dove for cover, sending wild shots into the cabin walls. She tumbled to the ground, crawling behind a small stack of firewood, heart hammering so loudly it drowned the thunder. Rain battered her shoulders. "Olsen!" she cried. "Are you hit?" His voice came from somewhere near the door. "I'm good. They're pinned down." Another bark and growl echoed from inside as Echo braced at the threshold, ready to attack anyone breaching the doorway. The cabin's thin walls shuddered under the blasts. Lightning streaked across the sky, illuminating the SUV. Melanie glimpsed the silhouette of a figure crouched behind it, fiddling with something metallic. Was it a heavier weapon? She fired a warning shot toward that shape. Sparks flew as bullets ricocheted off steel. "We just want the dog," a voice snarled in the storm. "Hand him over, nobody gets hurt." Melanie gritted her teeth. "Never." She prayed other campers were taking cover and calling the authorities. But who knew if the lines were being jammed? Wind-driven rain soaked her hair, and each thunderclap shook the ground. Her mind spun. These attackers knew exactly where to find Echo. Had they traced her phone? Or were they simply Carter's men following any lead from the station? She had no time to dwell. Another burst of bullets struck the side of the cabin, punching holes in the flimsy siding. Olsen returned fire, forcing one attacker to drop his weapon and scramble for cover. The standoff felt like it could end in tragedy any second. Lightning flickered again, and Melanie saw a terrifying sight. One of the intruders crawling along the side of the cabin, trying to get around the back. Olsen was busy exchanging shots with the other two. If that flanker reached a window, he could storm in and grab Echo or worse. Trembling with anger and fear, Melanie crawled behind the porch's remains to cut him off. Echo's barking spiked to a frenzy, as though sensing the infiltration. She heard glass shatter. Her mind reeled. Had he broken a window, or was it the intruder? She rose, weapon raised, scanning the darkness. Lightning revealed the man crouched near the rear window, about to climb inside. Time slowed. She fired a single shot, aiming low. He screamed, collapsing into the mud. Another burst of thunder smothered the sound. Then, as if triggered by the chaos, a wave of bright headlights swept into the RV park, accompanied by the shrill wail of sirens. Relief flooded Melanie at the sight of local patrol cars flanking from the far entrance. The attackers scrambled in panic, piling into their SUV. Its engine roared, tires spinning wildly on the soaked gravel. One more shot rang out before they sped away into the storm, leaving one wounded man behind, writhing and cursing. Panting and drenched, Melanie stumbled toward Olsen, who leaned against the doorframe, breathing hard. Echo stood by him, muzzle bared, fur bristling. "You okay?" she gasped. Olsen nodded, swallowing. "Scraped by a fragment of wood, but otherwise fine." Rain poured off the cabin roof in sheets. The swirl of red and blue lights advanced, and uniformed officers jumped out, guns raised, unsure what awaited. Through the deluge, Melanie's adrenaline crashed, and her knees nearly buckled. One attacker apprehended, the others fled. But the message was clear. Carter's network had escalated from intimidation to outright assault. She slumped beside Echo, pressing her face to his damp fur as police swarmed the scene. "You're safe," she whispered, though part of her doubted the words. They had survived another violent ambush. How many more before the senator intervened? The rain-soaked hours that followed the shootout blurred into a whirlwind of flashing lights, urgent voices, and medical triage. Paramedics treated Detective Olsen's minor cuts while uniformed officers taped off the cabin's bullet-riddled walls. Melanie gave her statement to the local deputy in charge, describing the sudden ambush by 3 unidentified men, clearly no random campers. One attacker lay wounded and under guard, refusing to speak apart from cursing that he didn't sign up for a war. Through it all, Echo remained at Melanie's side, dripping wet and vigilant, as though any lull might bring fresh danger. Just after dawn, the storm clouds cleared to reveal a pale sky. The wounded man was taken to a nearby hospital, flanked by 2 patrol cars. Local authorities, upon learning the fuller story, seemed stunned. The attackers had demanded the dog, which the paper trail now labeled as a crucial witness in a federal conspiracy. Wary of stepping into a national tug-of-war, the local chief insisted on calling in the state police for backup. Melanie appreciated the gesture but knew it wouldn't fix everything. The truth was bigger than any single precinct, and if Carter's men had just tried a lethal assault, there was no telling what they might attempt next. Detective Olson used a borrowed office in the RV park's main building to phone Colonel Ramirez. Senator Blake, it turned out, had just managed to push through a preliminary protective order for Echo. The official statement declared the K-9 to be under temporary congressional safeguard, meaning that, on paper, no one could seize him without Senator Blake's direct authorization. Though that sounded promising, Melanie was too battered from the night's events to celebrate. She wondered if men who shot up a quiet campground under the cover of darkness would be deterred by legal paperwork. Still, it was a step, maybe the final piece they needed for an open path to justice. By mid-morning, paramedics recommended transporting Echo to a vet for a checkup. He hadn't taken a bullet, but shards of glass from the cabin's broken windows had caught on his fur. Melanie gently combed out the splinters while an officer stood guard outside the battered cabin. Echo trembled once or twice, not from pain, but from the tension lingering in the air. Each time, Melanie murmured soft reassurances, stroking his muzzle until he relaxed. Memories of Parker's recorded words flickered in her mind, as if urging her to push forward. If Carter's men were desperate enough to stage that ambush, she was certain they wouldn't stop until the entire smuggling ring was laid bare. Late that afternoon, Colonel Ramirez himself arrived on site, wearing civilian clothes and driving a government-plated sedan. A pair of subdued but clearly adept staffers accompanied him, each carrying documents with the congressional seal. They conferred briefly with the local police, then joined Melanie, Olson, and Echo beneath the awning of the RV park office. Ramirez's eyes flicked over the bullet holes and scattered debris, tension etched across his face. "So it's escalated," he said quietly. "No turning back now." Olson explained how the wounded attacker had refused to identify who sent him. The man's phone, confiscated by the police, featured multiple coded messages referencing handling the K-9. Melanie showed Ramirez the order from Senator Blake, the only tangible shield she possessed. Ramirez nodded grimly. "Carter's network must realize the Senate has evidence. They'll act fast to cover their tracks, possibly even flee. But we have a window to move first." He handed them more documents, a formal protective custody assignment for Echo, stamped with committee authority. "If we get the dog to Washington, he'll be placed under guard for the duration of the investigation. Senator Blake will hold a public briefing in 2 days, citing the K-9 as a material witness connected to Parker's revelations. The press coverage will make it nearly impossible for Carter's allies to seize him." Melanie felt a swirl of relief, panic, and sorrow. She exchanged a glance with Echo. Would whisking him away to Washington truly keep him safe, or would it open him to new risks? Yet the alternative, staying hidden on farmland or in motels, had nearly cost them their lives. She swallowed hard. "All right," she said. "Let's do it." Over the next few hours, they made hasty preparations. The local station arranged for safe transport, while Olson coordinated with Uncle Ray and Deputy Lee back home. News traveled quickly. The man who'd been shot near the cabin was rumored to be ex-military, likely a hired enforcer tied to Carter's ring. No sign of Cordova emerged, leaving Melanie wondering if the embattled agent had retreated to protect herself. Meanwhile, Colonel Ramirez remained in constant communication with Senator Blake's staff, finalizing arrangements for Echo's official handover. By the following morning, a small convoy formed. A discreet SUV, bullet-resistant and borrowed from the state police, would carry Melanie, Olson, Echo, and Ramirez. 2 state trooper vehicles would run ahead and behind. They set off at dawn, hoping to reach an airfield in the neighboring state where a government plane could take Echo onward to Washington. As they pulled away from the RV park, Melanie spotted worried faces peering from the windows of various campers. One older woman gave her a small wave as if wishing them luck. Echo gazed out the back window, ears perked, but silent. The drive started uneventfully. Ramirez relayed new intel. Carter had allegedly gone on leave, though nobody knew his whereabouts. Some suspected he would attempt to vanish overseas if the Senate inquiry proceeded. Senator Blake intended to request immediate subpoenas for Carter's known associates, forcing them to testify. Listening to the colonel's updates, Melanie felt a surge of pride. Parker's sacrifice and Echo's survival had sparked a reckoning that might bring down a corrupt operation. They crossed state lines under a chilly gray sky. The lead trooper car kept a steady pace, lights off to avoid attention. The SUV behind them carried additional officers on alert. Hours passed, marked only by the hum of the engine and Echo's occasional whine for a bathroom break. Twice they stopped at rest areas, carefully scanning for black SUVs or suspicious watchers. Each time, tension in Melanie's chest eased when no threats emerged. Late afternoon found them nearing the quiet airfield, a small facility typically used for private charters and agricultural flights. A single silver government plane waited on the tarmac, engines idling. The troopers spread out, forming a protective perimeter. Ramirez stepped out first, scanning the runway with a hawk's gaze. Satisfied, he motioned for Melanie and Olson to bring Echo out. The Shepherd hopped onto the pavement, nose up as if testing the wind. Melanie's heart pounded. One final stretch. Just board the plane, let the Senate staff secure him in witness protection, and maybe, just maybe, end this nightmare. Then a blast from a siren shattered the calm. A black SUV tore around a corner of the hangars, screeching to a halt near the chain-link fence. Men in dark suits bearing the unmistakable posture of federal agents leapt out. Melanie's blood turned cold. Cordova. She recognized that stern face in the driver's seat. "Stop!" Cordova yelled through a megaphone. "This operation is unauthorized. You are ordered to stand down." Tension crackled in the airfield. State troopers drew weapons but held them pointed down, uncertain if a shootout might erupt. Colonel Ramirez strode forward, brandishing the fresh protective order. "Under direct authority from Senator Blake, this K-9 is entering federal witness protection," he called, voice echoing across the tarmac. "Any interference will be considered contempt of Congress." Cordova stepped closer, fury twisting her features. "That dog is classified property under a national security directive. You have no right." Ramirez cut her off. "Your directive is superseded by the Judiciary and Armed Services Committees. Unless you want to challenge the Senate's jurisdiction in open court, I suggest you stand aside." A hush fell as Cordova's men glanced at each other. Even they sensed that public support had shifted. Journalists had run multiple stories painting Echo as a key to unmasking smuggling and corruption. The troopers, for their part, formed a line in front of the plane, ready to defend their orders. Melanie stood with Echo at her side, watching Cordova's expression flicker with indecision. Then, in a desperate move, Cordova lunged toward her belt. At once, half a dozen guns leveled. Ramirez barked a warning. "Don't!" The second hung suspended, heavy with the possibility of bloodshed. Cordova's chest heaved. She let out a ragged breath and pulled empty hands upward, indicating she wouldn't push it further. The tension snapped like a frayed wire. One by one, her agents backed down, forming an unhappy cluster near the fence. Echo bristled, letting out a low growl. Melanie placed a calming hand on his back. "We'll file a formal protest," Cordova growled. "You're making a grave mistake." Colonel Ramirez didn't bother replying. Instead, he signaled to the troopers who escorted Melanie, Olson, and Echo onto the waiting plane. Moments later, the cabin door closed, the engines roared to life, and the runway blurred beneath them. From her window seat, Melanie glimpsed Cordova's SUV shrinking into the distance. Echo curled by her feet, and she buried her fingers in his fur. Olson exhaled, leaning against the seat. "We did it, for now anyway." High above patchwork fields, the plane leveled out. Colonel Ramirez leaned over from his seat. "Senator Blake is meeting us upon landing. She'll ensure Echo is placed under official guard. We'll expedite the inquiry, lock Carter out of every corner he tries to hide in." Melanie nodded, relief mingling with the bittersweet realization that she might soon have to part ways with the dog she'd come to care for so deeply. At the thought, Echo nuzzled her shin, as though sensing her unease. She forced a smile and whispered, "Don't worry, boy. You won't be alone." 48 hours later, in a secure corridor deep within a Senate building, Melanie watched from behind tinted glass as Echo stood with a pair of uniformed handlers. They'd placed an official K9 patch on him again, new, clean, and symbolic of his shift from fugitive to protected witness. Senator Blake herself had made a public statement describing Parker's partial recordings, referencing a heroic K9 who carried hidden evidence. The wave of national outrage against corruption forced the Department of Defense to acknowledge an active investigation into Major R. Carter, who'd allegedly fled the country. Arrest warrants were pending for multiple associates. With a final pat, Melanie crouched and gazed into Echo's warm, intelligent eyes. "We did it," she said softly. "Your story, Parker's story, it's out there, and no one can shut it down anymore." Her throat tightened. "They'll keep you safe, and if Parker's alive, this is his best chance to come forward. You've given him hope." Echo pressed his nose against her hand, tail wagging slowly. The depth of emotion in his gaze told her he understood more than words could convey. She stood, tears threatening to blur her vision. Senator Blake touched her shoulder gently. "You've done this country a great service, Officer Brooks. Once the hearing is finished, we'll discuss returning Echo to you, or seeing if Parker resurfaces. For now, trust that we'll guard him well." Melanie nodded, stepping away with mixed pride and sorrow. After all the danger, the dog who had unexpectedly entered her life was now safe in the hands of people who could protect him at the highest level. As she left, she heard a faint bark echo behind her, one last goodbye or perhaps a promise that their paths might cross again. Heart full, she walked on, resolved that wherever Parker was, he could finally rest knowing his loyal partner was alive, honored, and ready to bring every secret to light.